Sky now. Call 908-500-1474 and visit skyofangels.com.
Wow. Hey, everybody. Yeah, I love this. Cultural Brilliance Radio, the DNA of organizational excellence. Claudette Rowley is in the house. This is what she does. Cultural Brilliance is her organization. She is the CEO of Cultural Brilliance. But most importantly, the work that she does in organizations is about people. And, we often forget that we are talking about people. And if you're listening to this show and you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, I might be running a company, but maybe I'm not. How do I have a conversation with Claudette and help my organization make a positive change? Because that's really what we're talking about. There's truly the dark side that many people hear about, many articles are written about. But this is about cultural brilliance. And what does that look like? What does that mean? And so today we're going to talk about, can we change culture? Can we change it? You all that are listening, you can go to the website culturalbrilliance.com and lots of information there. Also archives of Claudette's show, how to contact her. I love this next segment here in this idea, the neuroscience of culture, Claudette. I really love this. I love that term because most people see culture and culture change as complete chaos. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Can you tell folks what the neuroscience of culture is about, and how does it relate when we use that term neuroscience? What are we really looking at here?
Yeah, happy to, Pat.
Yeah.
It's an aspect of culture that is overlooked, I think, a lot of times. I mean, if you Google it, you're going to find information about it, the neuroscience of culture. But we're really saying that the culture we're in, the environment we're in, does impact our brains. It does it impacts the wiring in our brains. It impacts how we perceive things. It impacts how we handle certain tasks. And so organizations, not all organizations by any means, but a lot of organizations still think of culture as this optional thing. Like, yeah, we should really address our culture, but you know what? It's just so overwhelming. We're not going to. And here we are, yet every day, day in and day out, people are in the culture of the organization, even if they, let's say, work from home, right? But they're still impacted by the culture of the organization, which is impacting how they think about things, which is impacting their brains. That's the neuroscience part of it. And it will impact their overall performance in the organization. So when we look at the neuroscience of culture, we really start to understand at a fundamental level that culture does matter because it's impacting how we think.
And, now we're really talking about organizations. When we say neuroscience, we're talking about there's a system operating here. There's a system operating here. And, perhaps it's similar to the way that, you referred to the wiring. There are so many connections in an organization. It's really important to acknowledge them, right? I mean, isn't that really the first step of this? What we're talking about here today is, as we look at the neuroscience of culture, we're looking at, wait a minute, these are people and there are connections and people are connecting. How do you determine how that system is operating? Is it operating well? How do you go about working with organizations to say, wait a minute, this is what I see here, this is what I see here?
A lot of it is, and I feel like I say this in every Cultural Brilliance radio show, is listening. Listening and observing, and really start there. What do we see? What do people look like? And by look like, I mean also facial expressions. And how are they interacting with each other? What are they saying? What are they talking about? What's the quality of the conversation? What is not being said? What's the energy like? A month or two ago, I did an initial session with the team in a small organization. What I noticed was that I'd really been prepped by the leader. The leader had said, I'm not sure how this is going to go over with this team. These are some of their expectations. They're concerned this is going to be too fluffy, et cetera, et cetera. So I get in there and and she prepares me well in terms of helping me understand the team. And the session actually went well. And she said, this went better than I thought. And then as soon as the session was over, I couldn't believe what changed, which was during our session, which was 3 hours, I think, that, there was calmness in the room. People were attentive and listening, very interactive. They did offer their opinions. They did interact with me and each other. Great. And then as soon as our session was over, the energy picked up like I couldn't believe. I'd almost never experienced such a quick change where they went into what I think was their normal mode, where people were racing all over the place. They were literally rearranging furniture for the next meeting. I mean, this was all within 30 seconds after we concluded our session. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it told me so much about their actual, probably authentic culture. It was that they're running so fast and so, everything was moving so quickly that I didn't even have time to pack up my stuff.
Wow.
Before they were on to the next thing.
Wow. Why do you think they were calm and peaceful, during your session? What was what was sort of the factor that influenced that?
I would probably two things. They were very prepped by their leader.
Okay.
And they of course, they knew I was coming, and they knew this was supposed to be more of a reflective session. And they're in the education field, so they're used to reflecting,
right,
as part of that paradigm. So they did get into it. They seemed to get a lot of value out of it and learn from it. But I thought, wow, if the culture, though, snapped back into place so quickly, how will they get to reflect again? How will they get to incorporate in what they've learned today? I mean, it was really, really an interesting experience.
Yeah. So chances are they may not even have the time to reflect on that. I mean, what I hear you saying is very characteristics of a lot of organizations today, that are running so fast, they always feel like they're behind. So when there's an opportunity to look at doing something different or operating in a different way, don't you find that people really look at their watch and say, when am I going to fit that in?
Yeah, they do. And I actually had the privilege of hearing one of the leaders from the Center for Creative Leadership speak recently. And he does a lot of coaching all over the world. And he had a very dry sense of humor. And he said, I'm getting old now, so I can get away with saying a lot of things that other people couldn't. And he says he'll literally say to leaders, when was the last time you thought? When was the last time you sat down and thought about what you're doing? And he's actually gotten responses like, well, we don't have time for that. We don't have time to think, and so some of his coaching is around thought and action produce better results than action alone. And this was not, what he really just called it out, what so many people are experiencing and thinking is that people literally are saying, I don't have time to think. Now, when I say that, we all, if we stop, we all realize that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to take action without thinking first.
But the kind of thinking you're talking about, though, is not the thinking about what am I going to do next. You know what I mean? You're not thinking like, okay, I've got to go from A to B to C to D, right? You're thinking, how am I going to get there? And what's the shortest distance between 2 points to get me there? Not thinking about, well, wait a minute, let's stop for a minute and think about what might be possible here. That's, I think, the thinking that you might be referring to. It's that creative thinking, or is it just all of it? We're just kind of like marching to the next text message I get.
I think it's both. It's definitely the creative strategic thinking. Where you need a little space and time for it. And in some instances, I'm even seeing it's responding to problems and putting out fires, which, yes, requires thinking. But sometimes it's happening in ways that when you look at it, you reflect and say, that could have been done in an easier way.
Yeah.
That could have, and not, I don't mean that in a judgmental way, just more of people aren't even stopping for 10 minutes to just say, wait a minute here. What's the best course of action? Or let me consult with my colleague for a minute, and see what the best course of action might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this affect creativity? Let's talk about creativity a minute, because creativity is part of the neuroscience of anything, I think. There's like a creative vibe. There's this moment where ideas come together. I would imagine that going on a week-long retreat is not going to happen with this organization, right? But what do you do in situations like this? how do you help people take a moment to breathe, so to speak?
It often starts with bringing this to their attention,
Mm-hmm.
And getting their feedback on it, and saying, having them start to think about and reflect on what would be possible for them if they did actually spend some time in whatever, whether it's individually in some sort of group setting, did spend some time really reflecting on how well are they doing? What are areas that could be improved? What's their experience like? What do they think is getting missed? Because creativity does need some space and time periodically.
Yeah.
And without that, you're missing. Chances are most organizations are missing a lot of opportunities, particularly when part of their culture is let's move as fast as we possibly can.
Well, I mean, clearly there is this understanding of the connectivity of things when we're talking about neuroscience. We're talking about, somebody's got to understand, or somebody's got to take a moment to understand the connections to things. Who is that person, and how do things get done? What is the reason, the rationale why culture might need to evolve? How? But most importantly, why? Is it always out of the last ditch effort to make sure you're not missing a deadline? And what happens if you work for a phone company like I did and you miss that deadline that has to do with that fancy dancy new phone feature that you've got on your smartphone? Those things really do happen, and do we ever look at culture? Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Leslie Fontaine, and my show is Sheer Alchemy on TransformationTalkRadio.com. When we're bogged down with our emotions, the hardships that plague us in our relationships, at work, our finances, we literally can't see the higher plane where we could be operating from. Tune in to Leslie Fontaine, Sheer Alchemy on TransformationTalkRadio.com.
If you're one of the millions of Americans suffering from anxiety, you probably know how powerless and out of control this emotion can make you feel. This is why it is so important to remember that anxiety is created by your mind, which means that you can learn to use your mind to uncreate it. Hello, my name is Dr. Friedman Schaub. My award-winning book, The Fear and Anxiety Solution, provides you with a step-by-step breakthrough process to understand and resolve the root causes of your anxiety and build a solid foundation of confidence and inner peace. If you're ready to take your power back, visit thefearandanxietysolution.com. That's thefearandanxietysolution.com, or call 866-903-6463. That's 866-903-MIND.
Brand consultant and coach Jen Morgan is here with Radically Distinct Radio to help maximize your brand's power to produce results. Whether you're a person with a dream and unsure where to start, or a CEO of a successful company wondering what's next, Jen Morgan and the RAD method empowers you to play to your strengths and focus your competitive edge so you can show up in the world as your most powerful brand. Go to jenmorgan.com or call 206-972-5366.
Would you like to experience life-transforming adventures in personal expansion and world service? If you do, tune in to learn about magical innate abilities that you can develop and use to make your dreams come true. Joy Elaine is author of the Joy Chronicles, and she's inviting you and millions of others to join her in working with galactic masters, angels, and the Ashtar Command as they assist humanity and planet Earth to achieve their ultimate destination of ascension. For more information about this upcoming event and broadcast,